Have you ever been so sure that you knew what the problem was, and then later you realized you were completely wrong? It's happened to me. It happens all the time. And in process improvement, that is something dangerous. Because if you fix the wrong problem, you don't improve anything. That's why the measure stage exists. This is where we stop guessing and we start looking at reality. A lot of teams skip this step. They jump straight from, okay, we've defined the problem, to let's fix it. But here's the issue. What people believe is happening and what's actually happening are often two different things. You might think delays happen at intake, but when you look at the data, they're happening somewhere else entirely. Lean Six Sigma is built on a simple idea. You cannot improve what you cannot measure. The measure stage helps us answer questions like, how's the process performing today? How often do problems happen? Where are delays actually occurring? And how much variation is there? This is where we build an objective view of the process, not based on opinion, but based on data. The first thing we establish is something called a baseline. This is your starting point. Before you fix anything, you need to know, what does performance look like right now? For example, you might find average wait time is 70 minutes. Some patients are seen in 12 minutes. Others wait over 2 hours. Now think about that. That variation tells a story. And later, when you make improvements, you'll come back and compare against the baseline. But if you don't have a baseline, you won't have anything to compare to, and you won't know if anything actually improved. Now we start collecting data, but not just any data. Our data needs to be accurate, consistent, and relevant to the problem. So for example, in healthcare, that could come from system timestamps, reports, observations, or even manual tracking. Here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes the data confirms what people believe, but many times it doesn't. You might discover delays only happen on certain shifts, or only in certain departments, or only under certain conditions, and that's when things start to click. One of the most overlooked steps in the measure stage is defining what you're actually measuring. This is called an operational definition. Because if people measure things differently, your data becomes useless. Take something simple like wait time. That could mean arrival to triage, arrival to provider, or triage to treatment. So we must define it clearly. For example, wait time is the arrival time to provider evaluation. Now everyone measures the same thing, and your data becomes reliable. In the define stage, we created a high-level process map. But here in the measure stage, we must go deeper. We map the process step by step, and this is where problems start to reveal themselves. For example, where does work stop? Where does it wait? Where do handoffs happen? In one case, a team discovered that most delays weren't happening in the lab. They were happening before the sample even got there. That kind of insight changes everything. Once you have data, you don't just stare at spreadsheets, you visualize it. Simple charts can reveal patterns instantly. Trends over time, spikes during certain hours, differences between day shifts or night shifts. So for example, you might see wait times spike every afternoon. Weekends consistently perform worse. Now, instead of guessing, you know exactly where to look next. Here's something most people miss. Processes are not consistent. They vary. Now, some variation is normal, but some variation is a signal. If wait times fluctuate a little, that's expected. But if they spike dramatically at certain times, that's telling you something is wrong. The goal of measure is to separate normal variation from problem variation. Now, let me give you a few mistakes to avoid. Collecting too little data, measuring the wrong thing, inconsistent definitions, relying only on averages. Averages can hide problems. You need to see the full picture. By the end of the measure stage, You should have a clear baseline, reliable data, defined measurements, a detailed process view, and visual insights. Now you're no longer guessing. You're seeing the process as it really is. And that sets you up for the next step, the analyze stage. That's where we figure out why these problems are actually happening.